Right.
or people who like me, who think I have the vision and the capability to deliver. Right? It's a game of being present at the retailers and incentivizing retailers to push a product. They can't be in a position where simply because numbers are being made, they stay into the market.
Hi, Deepak. How are you?
I'm good, Muskan. How are you?
I'm great. And today I have a very crucial first timer question, sort of, because, these first timer questions are something where you need to be, right on the point because you don't get really second chances here. So the topic really is finding your first users. So this is for all those entrepreneurs who are, starting out with their startups and everything. So jumping onto it, Deepak, we have always seen that these brands try to focus on entrepreneurs try to focus on their product in the initial phase, and somewhere or the other they forget that there is a target market that they need to cater to. So do you think that in this initial phase it is important to focus on this target market or their product, or does it go hand in hand?
It has to go hand in hand. I think
Right.
lately, so you're right, there is a chance that most people just only focus on their product or actually fixate on their product.
Right.
And they forget that they have to find the target audience because only then the product will iterate and so on. But then there is this almost glamorization of MVP, right? Minimum viable product.
Right.
And a few famous people, in fact, like the LinkedIn founder, they said that if you're not embarrassed by your first version of the product, you're launching too late. Now with that, there has become almost like it's almost like you're launching a half-baked product in the market.
Right.
It looks nice and it looks very fancy and up to the new age that you're launching on day one, etc. But remember, it has to be a finished product.
Right.
Yes, there is no end of the features which people will request, but at least it should be able to measure up to what the expectations are. Right? So there has to, what you said was exactly correct, that both of them have to go hand in hand.
Right.
If you're creating a product, yes, focus on what the core features are, develop them, and then launch it. It is true that the majority of your product will be built after the feedback.
Right.
Right? But both of them have to go hand in hand. You create a core product, launch it, get the feedback, iterate it, and keep on launching it.
Right.
So this question actually came from the traditional methodology which companies used to create. I remember when I was working in a corporate, somebody came from UK with a product plan.
Right.
And when we had done the entire product planning and all that stuff, he said, okay, so now this looks good. We will start building and we estimate 2 years to build it. Now that sort of a scenario is no longer possible.
Right,
In 2 years, market will change, product will change, competition will change, everything changes. So you have to be faster. That is true. And you have to look at the target audience. Still, there has to be some measure of confidence in your product.
Right.
So you should feel that, okay, if I'm going into the market to my target customers and telling them, okay, this is the pain point which my product will solve. It is solving it.
Right.
Don't go with building up the expectations, and when the customer feedback says, oh, it's not working, then you try solving it.
Right.
Which is also approach which I see sometimes. But both of them have to go hand in hand.
But I've also seen at the same time that, so targeting your first users and building product according to their feedback is really important. But at the same time, this process never ends really, because I've seen with, old age brands like Tata Tea, I've seen that they've started coming out with these different teas for different tiers also. Like there's Tata Agni for tier 2 or tier 3. They came out with it later on. They started with something else entirely. So,
Right. So a quick comment on that. So what you're mentioning are product variations.
right.
So once you're in the market, you will keep on getting new variations.
Right.
So a Hyundai or a Maruti will keep on adding newer models. And Apple will keep on releasing new versions of its Mac Pro.
Right.
That is fine, and that's a continuous process. Right? But if you're talking about first timers or entrepreneurs who are just getting started,
Right.
they don't have the luxury of creating multiple variations.
True.
Right? They would almost always go into the market with one product, and one product with a few different features.
Right.
As they mature, they will add more features, and when they mature further, they will add more variations. Right? So all of that is a due course of process, as you said.
Right.
So somebody like Tata Tea, as a established brand, will keep on adding variations.
Right.
And I think sometime back we were having that conversation. it will also localize it. Right? If it's going to some other country, it would localize the taste. If it's going to some other geography within India, it would localize the taste.
Right.
In fact, in tea industry, we know, so we have a tea company, so we have seen that the taste differs within a few kilometers. Right?
Yeah,
so,
true.
right? So somewhere people want really, really hard and right, those patti wala chai.
Yeah, true.
Right? And there's somewhere else people want a very mild taste,
With a lot of milk in it.
with a lot of milk in it. Right? So all of these are variations, and
Right.
obviously these FMCG brands are very smart. They keep on doing it. For the entrepreneurs, they usually don't have that luxury.
Right.
So you will have one core product with, let's say, 3 to 5 main features on which you are selling.
Right.
So you can create those features, ensure that they work as expected, launch it into the market, get the feedback, improve, reduce, increase the features, but the process will never end.
But at the same time, now FMCG is a industry wherein you can actually do these variations time to time and very fastly. But industries like automobiles, they really don't have the luxury to bring out new variations or new sort of, for example, if it's a Mercedes brand, they cannot bring out their cars or their new models very quickly. But at the same time, now this comes back to our previous conversation that we had in some other episode, that traditional marketing is for brands like these who have the liberty and luxury of doing it. But at the same time, these brands take years. For example, Apple always launches year after year when they're launching their product. So an entrepreneur or startup cannot really.
That's true, which is why, see, again, every industry would have a different cycle and a different R&D exposure.
Right.
Right? So if you are a Boeing or an Airbus, the amount of R&D required is much different.
True.
Right? If you're a car manufacturer, the amount of R&D required, customer research required, different material, or maybe if you're making a self-driving car, right, the research required is different. Now, when we talk of something which is a little different brand, something like what you mentioned, FMCG or tea, right, they also would require a lot of consumer behavior research.
Right.
Even though the R&D may on the surface look less, right? Because in the end, you're creating a tea blend.
True.
And you might say, okay, R&D is a little bit less. You still want a tea taster, you want consumer behavior research, but the cycle may very well be low.
Right.
And all of those things depend on the industry. Now come back even a step back, right? Something like a fashion brand, they can change even faster. Right? And they do change, right?
Yeah.
With seasons or with different collections or with different occasions.
True.
So every industry has its own timeline on which it follows. But coming back again to your question of smaller startups or entrepreneurs, none of them have this luxury.
True.
Which is why when they come into the market, they should have some sort of a concrete vision. What is the problem they are going to solve?
Right.
And in their ideal product, they might have 20 features which do everything, but they can't launch with 20 features because it takes time and money and effort. So they have to figure out what are those core 3-5 features, create that product, go into the market, get the feedback, iterate, and keep on improving. It's a never-ending process.
Right. But with this process, I guess it's very important to, somewhere or the other, either fix or, have an idea that who your first users should be really. So how do you suggest they should, what is the process? How do they focus on who their first users really should be? Who will give them that feedback?
In fact, Muskan, yesterday I was talking to someone,
Right.
and this question came up. Right? Are you looking for your first few users or are you looking for your first few customers? There is a distinction there.
Right.
Because users are those who will provide the feedback which will improve your product. Customers are those with whom you have a financial arrangement.
Right.
And both of them may be the same, but may very well be different.
Okay.
I would say initially your priority is to get users. Even if they are in a trial phase, even if you don't have a financial arrangement, even if you're doing it free of cost. So the thing is to get the users, but just coming back, how do we get it? Ideally, before you start working on your product, you should have some idea that these will be my 3 to 5, or depending on the brand. So let's talk of a technology brand. So before you start creating that product, you should have some rough idea that these 3 to 5 big brands would be my first few users. Right? Because creating a product and then going into the market to find the users will always be difficult, whether you're searching for 3 or 30. So initially, you should have some understanding that while you're building the product, you know what is the pain you're solving for these 3-5 customers. or
Right.
users.
Right.
Right? And that's a process which has to happen before making the product, while making the product. And then it will improve once you're done with it. So just as an example, I was talking to somebody from a shipping company.
Okay.
Uh, so shipping industry is also very traditional in the softwares it uses. Right? So for them, for a person to create a software will take 1 year or 2 years.
True.
And then to try finding the user or the customer would be even more difficult. Right? So before you start, you should know who do I know, who do I have as acquaintances,
Right.
or people who like me, who think I have the vision and the capability to deliver. Those people would be your initial users.
Right.
And ideally, you should know about them before you start your product building cycle.
But when you mentioned that there is one thing as your first time customers and one thing who are your first time users, I think so the difference lies between the first time users are basically those who are judging your product still. The customers would be somebody who actually trusted your product because they want to invest in it and, take your services and take your product and use it. They might still be judging it and even they might be using it for the first time. But at the same time, there is this a very fine line wherein the first time users are just really judging it and, giving an observation. They have not used your product yet. So,
True. So both of them are important, right?
Yeah.
So people who are judging without a revenue arrangement are not ideal. People who only have a revenue arrangement but are not using it are not ideal. So the best case scenario is both of them are same.
right.
Your users are the same as your customers. But for a new company, it is often, and at least if we talk about high technology companies, right, it's often difficult to enter into a contractual arrangement where you're getting revenue.
True.
Why? Because these have larger sales cycles. These have more complicated contracts. Now, if you're in a more, let's say impulse buy segment, let's take the example of an apparel brand.
Right.
Let's say tomorrow you launch an apparel brand. Now, who would your first few users be? They would very likely be your friends and family to whom
Right.
you send the product and then say, okay, fabric is good, Muskan, right? Fitting is bad or whatever is happening. Colors are good, designs are bad.
Right.
That is your typical judgment which you're mentioning, right? But you also have the ability to not judge, to actually launch in the market and just run some Facebook, Instagram ads to also get your customers.
Right.
In those industries, yes, it's possible to have both segments as well as have both segments as one. But in certain industries, you actually might need to focus just on your users.
Right, right, right. But at the same time, Deepak, I feel that there are brands who offer a product and they have it still pretty much resolved. But at the same time, there are brands who offer services. For example, I was with a PR firm and I knew that my whatever I'm writing or whatever I am offering my clients, it would be a one-time thing because they trust me with articles or with press conferences and stuff like that. And that happens one time only. So these are consumers which are coming to me. They may be a first timer consumer and they have this press conference which is building their image. So now with a PR firm who's trying to build your image, there are no second chances that they can take. Even after a feedback, they might do it with some other consumer, but with this consumer, they've already, somewhere or the other handled the image or they're trying. So brands like these really have it tough for them.
True, but let's take your example only, right?
Right.
So you're working in a PR firm. Let's say tomorrow you open your own PR firm.
Right.
What would your first step be? Right? Your first step would be to find people with whom you have worked.
True.
Let's say you come with me and say, hey Deepak, we have worked before together. Why don't we do your PR?
Right.
And in that case, I might become your customer. I might become only your user. If I become a user, I'll say, okay, Muskan, we are doing this event. Why don't you handle your PR with this?
Right.
And even in that PR, you would be doing 10 different services. Right? You will say, okay, we'll do 5 press releases. We'll do 2 media placements. We'll do this and that. So it won't be like there is a one make or break kind of thing.
Right.
And you will have multiple options sometimes. And in fact, in PR, this is very common.
Right.
Let's say you place an article about me in Times of India. And with your best intentions, you did the correct thing. But in the end, the journalist edited it or did something which I didn't like.
True.
So even in that case, we will have a conversation and I'll say, okay, next time let's do this better. So that keeps on happening, right? So in the case of services, this is the iteration which is happening.
Right. Okay.
The difference is in services, iteration happens for every client. So what you did for me didn't work for me. And I said, okay, Muskan, change it the next time.
Right.
but it very well might have been perfect for some other client.
Hmm.
Right? That is a core difference between a product business and a service business. In a product business, if you do an iteration, most likely it is for everyone using it. In a
Okay.
service business, if you do an iteration, most likely it is only for that particular customer slash user.
Hmm. Now, at the same time, like we are a podcast production agency, and podcast in India is still growing and coming up. There are different trends around it, and it's growing pretty rapidly. So we understood the market and we came into it, and this is our product really. But there are brands that try to focus on the product and say that they want to build something, some ideology that's very different, nobody has seen ever, or nobody has really copied, and it might get copied when I build it. But at the same time, now there is a risk that this product might not have a target audience or
True.
target market. So where do you think should the focus really be?
So these kind of startups will never start without a large amount of funding.
Hmm.
Right? In that funding, they now have to create the market.
Right.
Very different dynamics from the usual startup entrepreneur
Hmm.
who has who has an existing market, has an existing idea. This is what I can do.
Right.
If you're going into the market which doesn't have any previous use case, you have not seen, nothing has happened.
Hmm.
You need large amounts of money and large amounts of time
Hmm.
before you start getting the results.
Right.
Right? So those things will never happen unless you have multi-hundred millions of dollars of funding.
Hmm.
So look at the case of Zepto. Right? It introduced a new segment, quick commerce,
Hmm.
which was, so earlier everybody was very fine that Amazon is delivering next day, and then Amazon came with Amazon Fresh and they were delivering the same day. All of that was good. Right? And then came this concept of others, Grofers, etc., who were doing it much shorter time.
Hmm.
But nobody had imagined, right, getting products in 10 minutes.
Hmm.
That was a completely new market.
Right.
To tackle that market, obviously they needed billions of dollars of funding.
Hmm.
Right? So creating or entering a new market, no amount of my or our strategies are going to work. Right?
Right.
What will work is large amounts of money, because you don't know what will work and don't work, and you need to experiment, and large amounts of money is the only way to do it.
Right. But at the same time, it could be a service or product that might not require a really big funding or anything, and it could be different as well. Like it could be something, but at the same time, do you think the marketing will require this large amount of investment?
It will. Right? You have to create. So if, I mean, let's be honest, right? There have been many smart people before us.
Right.
If there was a gap in the market, almost certainly somebody has tried to fill it. Right? If they have not been able to fill it, there can be only two reasons. One, there was no market at all. They judged it wrongly, or something extra was required which they didn't have.
Right.
In almost all the cases, that something extra is money, and that money is spent on marketing. Let's again look at an example. Right? In India, we know a lot of food items are wasted. Right? Why? All the perishables. Right?
Right.
And yet there's a large amount of malnutrition in the country. So many people are sleeping without food.
Right.
How come nobody is solving this problem? They're not solving this problem because you need the infrastructure, you need the cold chain, right? Cold storage chain, you need the government acceptance, you need interstate travel,
Right.
you need transportation. Now, on the face, this is a wonderful idea if somebody had to solve it. Right? You have the market, you have the need, you only have to supply the infrastructure. But it needs so much of will and money and policy change that nobody has actually been able to do it at a scale.
Right.
Right? So maybe something which you're referring to is, let's say, a skincare product. Right? A skincare product, and then now there are these serums and argan oil, and somebody had not done it.
Right.
I would say those are more a variation of an industry which was already there. Right? A hair care product. So the industry is already there. Now you're creating something new out of it. That is obviously viable. Right? So you have these yoga mats, they've always been there. Somebody comes and says, okay, I'll make all natural jute yoga mat, which won't skid, right? Which won't have a bad smell, whatever it is. Those are all variations and improvements upon the existing market. They can certainly be done.
Right.
But a product which has never had any customer in any form, tackling that is tough without money.
I totally agree with your point where you said that somewhere or the other someone has already done it or have thought about it, because this is either a sad part or I guess all about money, that big brands like, for example, a parent company like HUL has tried their hands in everything and anything. And as we worked upon that Tata Tea wala example, in that only we can see that they've come up with so many variations, because these big brands do that. They, over the time, they start building things and ideologies which are not yet existing, but again with their product they try doing variations and all that.
Plus, they remaining in the industry, they know about the problems and
Yeah.
have solved the problems which you have not even seen. Right? So, outside from the tea industry, you could imagine that if I create the most perfect tea, it will sell.
Right.
But when you go inside the market, you'll find out that it's not a game about tea tasting, it's a game
Right.
of distribution. Right? It's a game of being present at the retailers and incentivizing retailers to push your product.
Right.
All of these problems only become visible once you're in the industry.
True. And above that, I guess they have those resources, the test labs, the researchers who are already working, and then they come up with these new products.
Plus testing, survey, consumer behavior research, and
Exactly.
they will know everything what you know 1 year before that. In fact, in the COVID times, or I think before around that, there was a huge spike in tea prices, in the tea leaf prices.
Right.
So smaller brand would suffer because of that, but the larger brands, they have a 1 year stockpiling of the raw material.
Right.
Right? So they can sustain that time. A smaller brand would be finished in that time. So there are so many different problems which smaller brands face, which larger ones, just by virtue of their scale, is able to bypass.
But when so this is also right, and because of that, I had this curiosity in my head that, okay, so I interviewed a lot of these D2C brands, wherein the one insight that I got was that all these brands, most of them started when the COVID was, at the peak, and they were at home and they had some weird, wild ideas in their head. But at the same time, now we have such parent brands, big brands already working and building so much, and way above them and way, unke kafi aage hain. But at the same time, these brands started building up, and there are so many brands. When I entered this D2C industry, I started interviewing these people. I found out that there are plenty and plenty of brands working on in the same industry. So if it's fashion, there are so many brands giving different things. Somebody's giving gymming options, somebody's giving yoga pants and everything like that, somebody's making products for only mothers and stuff like that. So what about these brands? They don't really have the resources or the luxury to be at their level.
Yeah.
And if they want to bring in a variation, they'll have to go through everything that these big brands are already going through, which is research, resources.
True. So you would have noticed what they did, or what all these successful brands did. They narrowed down their customers segment.
Right.
Right? So they focused on one particular customer segment and really nailed it down.
True.
So they understood who are my users, customers, and obviously Facebook and Instagram ads have made it much easier to reach the audience.
Right.
And so these days, if you had to set up an e-commerce store, it will probably be done in 1 day. Right? And anybody can do it.
Right.
Right? Go to Shopify, integrate Razorpay, create a Facebook, Instagram page, start your ads, and you're done. And the next day onwards, you can start getting orders/feedback.
Right.
So that is something which has changed. But that is also relevant for industries who have a product which is priced somewhere between 500 to 2,500, around that part. The moment you go beyond that, decisions are not being made online. Well, decisions are being made, conversions are not happening online. Right? It gets extremely tougher.
Right.
So these brands, they did the smart thing. So there was this wave of people who were online, and these brands focused and niched down. They found out which segment can work, and on that segment they would experiment.
True.
Right? They would experiment with different collections, if it's apparel, different fabrics, different pricing, right? All that stuff,
Right.
and getting the help of influencer marketing. So again, every industry would probably tackle it in a different manner.
Right.
At the same time, when it came with COVID, right, all these office space, no amount of marketing could have saved them,
True.
because there was no need. So all of these, right, industry and timing and which brand you are in, for at least for a startup, they have to, if not know everything, have an informed guess about everything, what can happen and what can't happen.
But now this makes us think that, what is that time frame to build your either product or ideology, because many brands have a product or have something in mind, but they spend these years in refining it and putting in this feature or that thing. And how do you define that, will if 2 years will be enough for your product, or if a few days will be enough to bring it in the market?
So fortunately, this has an easy answer.
Right.
Right? Your time frame is how much money you have.
Okay.
Companies only die off because of one reason: they run out of money.
True.
If you stay in the business, eventually you will either find the right product or the right customer and be able to do it.
Right.
So it's not 1 year or 2 year or 3 years or 6 months. It's how much money you have.
True.
And if that money can be sustained for X amount of time, do it. If it doesn't, then you have to figure something out in lesser time.
That is also correct. But at the same time, there must be something that these brands need to keep in mind while they're bringing out their product, whether they bring it in 2 years, if they have the right amount of resources
See,
and money.
again, it's the same thing, right? What is the ideal time to launch? It is today. Right? Today is the best time to launch. But are you ready today? If not, when will you be ready?
Right.
And you have to be ready before your money runs out.
Right.
Whether you're looking for users, customers, or investors. So how much money you have really defines a lot of things. How much money you can raise defines much larger things, because then you can run at a loss.
Right.
And many companies run at a loss and they keep on running for years after years after years. All of those games have to be played, and with a very, right, you have to be very cognizant that this is the game I'm playing. If the game is to get users, play that game. If the game is to get investors, play that game. If the game is to get investors via users, that is the game you're playing. Whatever it is, before you enter into the game, you should know what are the rules there.
But I got your point that money is a very important factor. But with money comes a bit of fanciness, wherein they think that they have a brand and now they need a very lavish launch for it so that everybody in this world should know that this product is getting launched.
Yeah.
And that's how, because then there are brands like Mercedes who don't even really, advertise much because they have made a name for themselves. So
See,
what
again,
about that?
they are different paradigms here. Right? So well-established brands like Mercedes, etc., they do advertise. They advertise or they have a very good PR, and they would be sponsoring large sporting events and stuff like that. Again, this depends on the type of brand you are looking at. I think now with the VC money drying up,
Right.
you will see lesser and lesser of these kind of launches and stuff happening. Everybody has to answer to someone.
True.
And that answer is no longer a lavish launch party. Even if you're getting a brand ambassador who is a big celebrity, somewhere you have to justify it with numbers.
Right.
Those numbers may not be revenue, they just may be users or daily active users, something like that parameter. But it has to be tied up with some measurable parameter. Something we talked about this before also, right? The days when marketing could just spend money and without worrying about what is the measurable, those days are now past.
But do you think they do something really? Like, do they give these numbers? Because that's the whole point. I mean, you're spending
They
large.
do. See, again, these are smart people. Like, nobody reaches at that level unless they are doing stuff.
True.
So they are smart people. There is also a good amount of faking happening. That is also true. And we always see, right? We have seen the FTX case. It's somebody who's valued at $16 billion. 24 hours later, he's at 1 billion. And now he's running away from all that stuff which is happening. And this company was funded by the world's top VCs. And these are all very smart people.
Right.
So decisions do happen where people are faking. But numbers are also being made.
Right.
It's again the first question which you said, it's hand in hand. Unfortunately, smaller brands do not have this luxury.
Right.
Right? They can't be in a position where simply because numbers are being made, they stay into the market.
Right.
So they have to know something measurable. And again, we come back, before the money runs out, they need to start generating some amount of money, whether by external funding or by getting their revenue with their different channels.
I guess that totally makes sense. So instead of doing launch parties, the startups should focus on putting their money at the right place and at the right time. Actually,
See,
time
actually,
is the
these days, no, at least now, once all of these big brands have started laying off people, I think launch parties are going less. In fact, what we will also see is a correction in salaries,
Right.
right? And that has at least started happening in the US. There is a correction happening because, and people will be conserving money. And it goes back to our initial point that marketing budgets would also get down,
Right.
which is why we have to focus on things such as what we're talking about, point of view marketing or putting your face there, which can be done and which have a higher impact but at a lower cost.
Can it be because it was hammered due to the recession that was forecasted?
Yes, it was because of recession, and you mentioned during the COVID time, everybody was online, so they overstaffed, and things are projected that this is what will happen, and all those crazy valuations,
Right.
and then certain even something which we mentioned about a new market, right? So people put money into a new market.
Right.
It doesn't always work out, right? So when it fails, it just sinks billions of dollars.
True.
So people are a little bit more hesitant in doing those things, and we are seeing a correction, which is why for smaller brands it just makes more sense to have a founder brand or just to have something which is a little less replicable, right? So that on that basis you can keep on increasing your asset.
I guess it's said that you need to have some touch of your own thinking to your brand so that it
Right.
actually is a little different from what already is there, because we have already established that things will be repetitive, or a product may have a lot of competition out there because somewhere or the other someone has tried it out already. But this somewhere or the other makes us come to an end, but we'll be consistent with these topics and everything. So thank you so much, Deepak, for giving us your time and discussing this thing with us.
Thank you, Muskan.